What's going on, guys? You know, the most common stakes that I teach are anywhere from about 25 NL to 200 to 500 NL, something like that. But every once in a while, a high stakes player will come along and hire me.
Hey Pete, what's up? Could you coach me in some 5K NL, please?
And usually just want someone to go over hands with, do some sanity checks and line checks with, maybe a bit of mental game or performance coaching here or there. So this student and I, we just have quite a laid back dynamic where we just chat through hand histories, do line checks, stuff like this. They're always amazingly interesting and fun. They're high stakes hands played between really good players. Some of my absolute favorite sessions, and I thought I would share a hand from last week with you guys today. So we have pocket 10s in this hand, and this hand is a 3-bet pot. We're playing a little bit shallower than normal. We've switched sites here and the auto top up wasn't working initially for some reason, so we're playing this about 80 to 82 big blinds deep instead of the usual 100. But in this hand, the river play is really fascinating. I think when you first see the river jam that my student makes here, you're going to be a little bit taken aback. You're going to think, surely this is like spew, or it's too thin, or it's too mergy, or it's like a polarization mistake or something like that. But I think in real life, this is actually fine, at least theoretically, and then we can discuss what we think of this exploitatively in a minute and how well this might work at your stakes as well. Just because you see someone do something cool at high stakes doesn't mean that it's a good idea at 100 NL or 10 NL or 1 NL. That doesn't exist, but you get the point.
I saw a high stakes guy in a Ferrari jacket do this, so it must be good.
So we open the pocket 10s, we call the 3-bet a little bit shallower than normal. Villain goes ahead and bets small on this flop, which they're going to do pretty frequently. And we just have a pure call. You know, we have a hand that doesn't need to rush pot growth. We'll be calling down on a lot of runouts with this hand, but we certainly don't want to do that by raising. So just going ahead and calling here being the only play. And this is definitely where you can get a bit lost. I think one of the strongest things that you can add to your game as a poker player is the ability to know when you're indifferent between two or more actions, in theory. And this is a spot where if you're playing against somebody skilled or balanced or whose strategy resembles a GTO strategy, there's not going to be a big EV swing here between betting like quarter pot or third pot and checking. The things you don't want to do is like bomb this for 75% pot or something that makes absolutely no sense. Other than that, it's kind of hard to go wrong here unless you bet too big. But in the real world, at lower stakes, you're probably going to do quite well here by betting. I don't think that your low stakes opponents are putting enough overpairs and ace queen into their turn checking ranges here. And so making a very small protection-y denial bet here for thin value is definitely a good way to go. My student was mixing between bet and check, obviously not really suspecting that one play was likely to be much better than the other.
So I think bet and check is going to be roughly the same EV here, so...
At the dizzy heights of 5k NL, where your opponents are, well, very good poker players. So we decided to check back this time as per the RNG, and we went on to the Queen of Spades River. I'm a big fan of betting there against weak passive players, though on the turn it's just going to be a really cool play to clean up equity. On the Queen of Spades, we face a block bet. So this is a really common line here. After you've block bet the flop and checked the turn as the small blind, you are going to have some hands that just want to go for an all-in. Like you're going to have a queen, and that's probably going to want to jam for 2x pot or just under. You're also going to have some hands that want to bet something a bit in between, like you might have a hand like jacks or 10s or 9s here yourself, and you might want to bet half pot or 2/3 pot or something in that neck of the woods. This sizing is definitely also okay with like plenty of the medium pocket pairs. If you have a hand like ace-7, this looks like the right sort of bet size. If you have a hand like 8s or 9s, this looks like a normal bet size. Jacks, I think, is really borderline here. In my chat with the student, he kind of said that he thought pocket jacks plus was going to be betting bigger than this at a really high frequency, and he said that even at high stakes,
these high stakes players, you know, they still make mistakes, so
he thinks humans don't do a good enough job of putting Queen X into the block bet range here. And I think the reason he'd make that kind of claim is just that it's kind of a counterintuitive thing to do. When you get to this river with a queen, even though the solver will be kind of tricky trappy with certain combos at some frequencies, especially like pocket 7s that I think that man might actually check, but you get the point. There's going to be like some slow plays here that have the blockers that don't want to put all the money in the middle or out of position, just want to go for the check jam instead of the bet. But yeah, he decided that humans were not doing a good enough job of betting smaller here with a hand like jacks or with a hand like a queen. And so he thought that what is actually quite a close thing in theory is actually just going to be a really good play in real life against humans. And he went for this. Now, Some of you might do stuff like this, and those of you who are a bit more skilled in hand reading and interpreting bet sizes, and who are more familiar with bet check bet lines and 3-bet pots, might be looking at this thinking, what's the big deal? This is fine. Like, that's thin, but it's probably okay. Like, whoa, big deal, Pete. How boring. But for many of you, you're probably looking at this thinking, I would never, ever even consider this play. And if you would never consider this play, it's because you're not doing enough hand reading around this bet sizing. Even in game theory, this is meant to be mostly capped. In real life, it could be more so, as we've said. But what that means is that hands like aces or kings or queen X or jacks, the hands that we normally lose to here, are just doing something different earlier on in the hand. They're playing the first two streets exactly the same way, but very often they're just going to barrel the turn. If you have a hand like pocket kings with no heart here especially, you're going to have an insanely high turn bet frequency here in theory. Pocket aces, also pretty high, maybe slightly less. Ace queen, also pretty high, but maybe a bit of check jam going on. But there's going to be loads of betting. And then by the time you hit this river, to get here with kings and only block bet, that's pretty counterintuitive. You know, most of the button's range that's calling the river isn't a queen. While there are some suited queen X combos and even a few offsuit queen X combos, the offsuit ones are going to be really big ones like ace queen and king queen, and these are the ones that are more combinatorically abundant in range, and they're just going to be betting the turn at high frequency when checked to. So the button's range here is definitely mostly going to be pocket pair. It's going to be 5-4, ace-4, 5s, 3s, 6s, some kind of weird ace-7 of clubs, sometimes maybe pocket 8s, that sort of thing. So when you have 9s or 10s, of course you have a clear value bet here, and you're going to make a sizing like this. You could even go small like this with a hand like 8s or 7x, I think, as well. So this jam is predicated on the belief that while there might be some hands that beat you, the real skill here is getting away from this absolute hand strength of 2 10s, away from the monsters under the bed thought process of seeing pocket kings here and imagining the worst case scenario and seeing ace queen. That's going to be super rare, and we go for this jam. Unfortunately, villain does not pay us off this time. They actually tanked for about 25-30 seconds here. They really did consider calling. That would lead me to believe they had something like pocket 8s. But yeah, you've got to try if you think your starting equity is this good. You've got to try to get called.
Maybe we could ask Pile Solver what he thinks of my play.
We have not actually run this sim in a solver. We just speculated about it before. So let's run it right now. I've just loaded this up. We've got queen 4 deuce. Let's see what this says. On the flop here, villain is going to be mixing between betting small and checking. I just removed the big bet for simplicity there. Playing very little raise at this SPR, that makes a lot of sense. I think you could simplify to a call only strat here without any EV loss. So I think that's probably what the student's doing. And we come to the turn, which was the 7 of diamonds. So on the turn, as you can see, aces, kings doing a ton of betting. Actually, weirdly, aces is doing a bit more betting than kings. But yeah, they're basically betting super often, ace queen as well. Some slow play going on there, but you know, as we said, many of those combos of hands that beat us are leaving range immediately. Jacks is still in there though, but that may well bet bigger on the river. So we have a check here. Our 10s can bet or check. Bet and check are both definitely fine here. As we said, if you're playing this hand at lower stakes, people are just going to do a bad job of checking these hands, and you might just want to go ahead and bet here and not expect to get check raised 15% of the time. You might get check raised a lot less than that. So anyway, we do decide to check back, and the river comes the queen of spades. And as we can see here, this block sizing is only really being used in GTO for pocket 8s or a bit of pocket 9s, and some hands that crush the calling range like quad queens. Pocket 7s is actually able to block bet. That's another slow play, just blocking some of those calls, but it's also able to go for the check all in as well. So yeah, the main hands that are actually doing this are 9s and 8s and a7 in theory, as we kind of suspected. So if this is indeed what's happening in real life, I can't see how pocket 10s wouldn't be an all in. I haven't looked at it yet, but surely we can jam. Okay, it's actually optional depending on suits and blah blah blah, a bunch of solver noise crap bullshit that doesn't matter. You guys know the drill with the solver. Some things really matter, some things don't. But this hand is not actually too thin. It is the sort of lowest hand that we are able to jam for value. If we have 9s, that would be too thin. It would be an EV loss, but this is indifferent, and therefore if the student is right that people are basically doing a terrible job of ever finding any of these slow plays here, like they're just not doing this with pocket queens, or they're not doing this with king queen, then yeah, this is going to be absolutely fine. I don't know exactly what I think about this play at lower stakes, because at lower stakes I just have this fear that people will undervalue jacks and they will block bet with it often. They might even fold it to a jam though. So like at low stakes, you even get this absurd world where you like jam here and they fold a better hand sometimes. Like that's the nature of low stakes. So, and you might even have a situation where people are randomly block betting with overpairs, not because they understand poker, but because they're weirded out about the second queen. So the queen comes in the river, they're filled with dread, they don't want to bet big, they bet small with kings or aces that they tried to trap on turn, and then they of course call the jam. So my initial impression is that this is worse at lower stakes than it is at higher stakes. I wouldn't make this play. If I was like teaching a 100 NL student or something, I don't think I'd recommend that they make this play, but it's super interesting to see what this looks like in theory. Super interesting to see that at high stakes and in theory, this makes a ton of sense. To reiterate, to recap here, what we're looking to do is understand that landing equity, understand that we actually get here with quite a lot of equity because the bigger hands are going into a different sizing. Do remember to look out for your opponent's bet size, to hand read properly, to notice it, and notice where hands leave the range at other junctures. You know, that's the real skill of being a good poker player, is being able to hand read so that you can piece together what to do. If you like the way we teach the game, don't forget to check out carrotcorner.com for all of our paid content, including the massive cash game course, the Carrot Poker School. See you in the next video, guys. Bye for now.